So unfortunately, they have to start then burying the men that they have collected out. So soon afterwards, from the 1st of that sort of January time, we have a picture here of some of the men, and you can see boys, because frankly, some of them are boys. You can see Leonard and Ralph do look very young in those pictures. I think the youngest was 14, I believe. They bring out the bodies and they start sort of having sort of almost daily funerals for the bodies that are brought out. Obviously, because of that, there is a fair amount of ephemera that's been left. Here you can see Oliver Green's Loving Memorial card, and you can see that though he lost his life on January the 12th, 1918, his funeral's not held until May the 11th. So obviously they haven't been able to rescue his body until that particular date, which is, you know, very tragic. In fact, the last body is not removed from the mine until August the 19th, 1919. Is when they actually were able to get the last body out from Mini Pit. Obviously, there's a list of all the names of the men, and as you can see right at the very bottom, you can see Hugh Dunbar, the gentleman who gave his life trying to find and save people, even though it's probably too late anyway, and all the gentlemen and all the boys and men who lost their lives in the Mini Pit disaster. Obviously, that caused a great deal of interest around the country. It was reported throughout the newspapers around the country, and there was a disaster fund set up giving people, really, the wives and children, some kind of money to keep going, because obviously some of these women had lost husbands or sons in the war, and now perhaps had lost other people in the Mini Pit disaster. And Wilfred Owen, for those of you who know Wilfred Owen as the great war poet that he was actually heard about it from newspaper reports and wrote this poem just after the disaster in the January of 1918. And as you know, he dies himself in 1918 at the end of the war, talking about how men are dying in battle, but they're also dying in the battlefields of the mines, and how digging rock can be as dangerous as being on a battlefield, and that people die in many ways, and they're doing it for their country, but they are still dying. So because obviously that, they set up, and there's now been a memorial. If you go to a Mini Pit, they've actually got that, and in 2018, they actually had a 100th anniversary where they held a vigil, a walking vigil, and remembered the names, read out all the gentlemen's names who died. And so it's still very well remembered and thought about in that area. So just before I finish then, two shorter stories, because obviously it is getting a bit tight for time, so it is my shorter stories. They're not funny per se, so they're funny sick, if you know what I mean. But when I talked to you earlier, some of you had got quite a dark sense of humour, so maybe you'll appreciate these stories. I do apologise if some of you find it a little bit of black humour. So Thomas Snape, it's a very obvious Wolverhampton name, Snape, someone who gave it. He worked at Thomas Turley's furnaces in Deepfield, Wolverhampton. Now, mining is obviously a big thing in Staffordshire and in the Black Country, but the other big thing in the Black Country is obviously to do with metalwork. And in fact, my dad worked in an iron foundry for all of his working life. So I was interested because I had to chat to him about some of this stuff, because he kind of understood what it was about. So basically, it was a Saturday night, and Thomas Snape is 19 years old, but he's been left in charge with two colleagues, John Gardner, who is 18, and 37-year-old Joseph Swift. And they're working together on a blast furnace. Now, I'll send you a picture. That's basically a blast furnace. So at the top, you can see the coal is going in at the top. It goes down. It gets very, 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 very hot. It melts the iron and breaks it into things like slag and the iron that you need, and you can see that it then comes out the bottom in what you need it to be. So it's a continuous motion. You can't turn these off. They need to be kept hot at all times, but they obviously need to be cared for because they can, of course, also then be, if you like, put too much coal in, or you might, put too little coal in and it goes out, for want of a better word. Now you'll see just at the side, and I've done like a little overlay at the top. You can see there is like a pipe at the bottom called a tree. Now that's French, I understand, for pipe, but you can see that that's the bit that you uncork, for want of a better word, to allow things to escape so it doesn't get too dangerous and doesn't get too hot. And then you've got the hole that allows other stuff to come out as well. So Thomas Snape's one job was to open it up at 7:30 to let the stuff out. Okay, that's his job. However, the three gentlemen decide that actually it's probably, look at the size of it, because you can see how big it is compared to the people. It's probably okay to leave it a bit, to block up the hole a bit more and go and get alcohol. So the three gentlemen block up the hole, walk to the local inn or house or hostelry of their choice and decide to get some booze. And then they decide to walk back to unstop it and therefore allow the molten metal to get out. So just as they get back, unfortunately, the molten metal has risen above the twire. Now, the twire is the bit that is basically the heating pipe that keeps things safe, and it melts the pipe. As soon as it melts the pipe, the whole thing basically will explode. And indeed, it does. There is a water jet that comes from the twire that's a jet of steam, the force of which blew out the front of the furnace just as the three men were preparing to tap it. 18-year-old John Gardiner was buried beneath the molten metal and was instantly melted away. He vanished, gone. Thomas, who should have been looking after it, 19-year-old Thomas, was splattered with the molten iron and so mad with pain that he leapt into the nearby canal, where he was then fished out. And as you did in 1866, instead of taking you to hospital, you were conveyed home to see if you needed hospital treatment, and needless to say, poor old Thomas Snape also died. The third gentleman, Joseph Swift, had been too injured to move, but had actually escaped most of the explosion, but was sadly quite badly injured. And they did actually feel that he was injured enough to go to the hospital, but he also died in hospital due to his injuries. The inquest was held 2 days later. Obviously, they did a post-mortem on the bodies and could obviously say what had happened to them, except for poor old John Gardiner, who'd obviously been vaporised. And they felt that it was a case of accidental death. But the coroner said, if Thomas had lived, it probably would have been manslaughter. There you go. Silly old Thomas, not going to drink. And my last story before I leave you, and there's the thing, that's the bit I read. The importance of training, or brains were dynamite. Now, William Ferns, this is in 1886, William Ferns decided to blow up the roots of a tree near his house to obtain some fuel. He worked a local mining place and he was able to get 2 gelinite cartridges, which he decided were a little bit too hard to go underneath the roots to cause the explosion. So he takes the gelatine and he takes it to the kitchen of his own house. And thinking it's too hard, he puts it on the oven to soften. He leaves the house, but funnily enough, within a few moments, hears an enormous explosion and returns to find his mother, Hannah, has literally been blown to pieces. His sister was in the same room, survived without serious injury, but the rest of the kitchen had been badly damaged. A verdict of accidental death was returned. And with that, I thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen.
Mental death. That's in manslaughter too, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank you.
I'll follow that. Anybody got any questions or other stories? Knowing you lot.
I think there were lots of sort of mining stories. There were an awful lot of boundary stories. Another area of the book that I don't really touch on in this talk is really how badly treated and the violence that was happening due to drink. A lot of women being attacked and children, and also the barbarity of how the children were treated by their families. There's ones you can't imagine it now. People talk about health and safety, and like there was the one story, and they go into the house, the woman's died, and they go into the house, and she's found on a flea-infested bed. And her husband is not a very pleasant gentleman. He's been using their tokens on booze. And the two children are found in the corner, almost starving. And the baby, who's about 12 months old, is tied to the chair to stop them moving around. And, and it's that kind of just thoughtless brutality. And another one I could have literally done every day was someone burning to death from a fire from their clothes. Every newspaper I found, a child got too close to a fire and was burnt. Every episode, literally, I could have just gone every single day. A girl would have too close to a fire while she was tending it. Children, their parents would be at work, and the eldest child, who'd be 9 or 10, would be left with 4 or 5 other siblings, some of them who were tiny, too close to the fire, knocking over pans. It was quite, so I try and end on sort of these were stupid people at the end stories, because they were stupid, but there are some stories that are really quite heartrending that happened to them. It could be really quite sort of depressing. So anyway, sorry, look, once I get going.
It's surprising in a way that the amount of detail in the newspapers, stuff that we would now consider gory and which they would warn you against.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I hadn't done the murder one that I do, my family murder one from the 1823, because obviously that's like Georgian, and they tell you exactly what was found inside, and it's a small child, and they talk about what the liquid was like in the stomach. They talk about how the lips are. They talk about they go, we talk about people being sort of numbed. It's almost like it was their sensationalism. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you, because I know a lot, obviously you're family historians, and you've seen like the London Illustrated, and it's almost like that. They haven't got the YouTube thing. They've got those pictures of this is how the body was found, and this is how her throat was cut. And it's interesting what they sort of focus on. So lots of these stories I couldn't find where they were actually held, the exact address, where the inquest was, where the coroner's was, but I know exactly what was inside the contents of the body. It's their sort of their interest in that kind of macabre rather than the sort of the details, like the things I was like, so where was Wolverhampton lockup, where were they kept, where did he run to, none of that. It's like, how much blood was on the clothing, where was the knife found, where was the bullet holes from. It's all like, where they entered, where they exited. Don't worry about where they were shot, where they were hammered to death. Don't worry about the address, just tell us what it was like in the house. We want to I'm in the bit in the Anne Griffith story, they talk about the shovel that she was hit with, the hammer. Some of them call it a shovel. Some say she was hit by the shovel. Some say she was hit by a hammer. But one that says it was a shovel said they were shown in court, and you could see flecks of her hair on it from the congealed blood. And they didn't tell me some of the names of the actual people. They said a witness who said, not the name of the witness, but we know there was congealed blood and a bit of hair on that hammer stroke, thing. Their interest was very skewed compared to what we find interesting, or perhaps there is still that gruesome bit.
It was an exciting.
Sorry, I missed that. I'm sorry.
I was going to say it's an exciting day out for the family to go and see a hanging, wasn't it? So
Yeah,
you can see where the excitement was, for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you mentioned about the hanging, Sheila, because what they did was, again, I didn't mention it in my talk, but they would always talk about how they went off. So they would talk about how they hung. So there was great delight in talking about how long they struggled once they were hung, whether they went off quickly or whether they struggled. And it was almost like the worse the crime and the more they felt they deserved it, such as a murder of an innocent, the more they hoped they would struggle while they died. If they thought it was, so some people felt that some of the hangings, because some people were being hung
too quick.
Yeah, so you could see there people were quite happy they went off quick. But if they'd done something bad, it was almost like boo hiss, make sure they don't die too quickly. Let's see them suffer, and that kind of thing about how they struggled. And that was always in the papers, how quickly they went off.
But your William Beard, was it William Beard in the first story? I mean, obviously made off with the loot or some loot, and he'd gone and got drunk for most of the rest of the day. He doesn't seem to have had the intelligence to run away.
No,
he seems to have accepted his fate once he was caught.
Yeah. But no, I am amazed by, because obviously I did quite a few of these. I am amazed by how many people simply thought they wouldn't work it out. It was almost like, oh, they won't work it out. They won't work it out. It's me. The fact that I'm covered in blood and got more money than I normally spend, it's like it won't link to me. And that really surprised me. As you say, how many people, or they would say to somebody, they would tell their family friends and say, "Oh yeah, I did it," but don't say anything. Friends, because they're family friends, and I am from working class, so I can say this because my family history is all working class. We were down the mines, we were in the ag labs, etc. They drunk a lot. They seemed to drink a lot, and it seemed to be they stole money. They went to the pub. They got drunk. They told their family what they'd done. They'd hit their wives. They'd hit their children. Then the person that they told would tell somebody like the local copper, and they'd get arrested. That was pretty much the stories. Somebody always told somebody who told somebody who told the copper. Copper heard it, and it's like and it's almost like you can't catch me, governor. It's like, but you did it. Idiots, and they talk about it in the pub, and it's like, where'd you get the money from? It's like, I don't know. And the Anne Griffiths one, he was in the pubs, and obviously people were coming into these pubs and saying, because obviously they knew he'd worked for John Crowther, and they were saying, have you heard what happened to your old boss's place? And he was going, literally like that. Now, if you heard, if you went to somewhere and someone said to you, did you hear about what happened to your boss? You'd be like that, wouldn't you? You'd be like, what's happened? What he went talk about this and left the pub. So everyone was like, well, that's a bit suspicious. So it wasn't just I think he could have got away with it with the boots, because if it had just been the boots and he'd clean the boots off, I think, because how many people have got boots like that? All of them must have been wearing boots with like nails in them.
Yeah,
of course they did. So there must have been loads of them. But the fact then he went squandering the money and said that he'd lent the boots to someone else, and he was seen round the house, hanging round, and then wandering off really quickly when anyone saw him. It's like, use your common sense. I mean, not that I'd say if you were going to do a murder, do that, but obviously, as you say, not the smartest tool.
You'd have thought he'd have covered his tracks a bit better.
Well, yeah, particularly in the snow.
Yeah.
It must be really cold.
He was probably too drunk to even think about it.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with you there. I agree with you there. But yes, it's quite interesting. Because one of the stories I didn't tell it today is the Gaskin murder. You know, the gas one, the gas pipe. Do you know that one? Because that's framed by Hensford. I didn't do it because I wasn't sure if you know it. And basically, her husband comes back from the war, and she's been a very naughty girl. She's been seeing several other gentlemen, and she's had a baby, which can't be his because he was at war. And she's saying, "Let's get back together," and he's like, "No." And so she's basically bothering him and saying horrible things. So he says, "Let's meet at Hensford Woods," and they meet at Hensford Woods, and basically she's never seen again until she's found all chopped up. So, but like loads of people see him with her, and he goes, "I never saw her. She never arrived." And it's like, well, everybody saw you with it. Several people saw them arguing, and then he writes a note to her mum saying she didn't turn up, and she said, "I'm going away." No, you didn't. Don't be stupid. So, but there you go. Oh, there's another story. You must look that one up. That's really gruesome. That's horrible. He does all kinds of horrible things with that body. If you like gruesome, look at the gas pipe murder. That's really horrible. It's about 1918, 1918. He's either at the end of the war, he's come back because he's injured. That sort of time period.
At what point did they have some kind of legal representation, or do they, in these cases, they just represent themselves?
Yeah, my understanding, because obviously I've spent most of the time when I did sort of spending a lot of time with the 1823 murder, and then there were people that sort of put the evidence up to the jury and brought forward the if you like the witnesses, and then the murderer, or in this case he was the murderer, was then supposed to have organised his own witnesses and got them to be interviewed, if you like. Well, this was an illiterate carpet worker, and he just went, I'm innocent, and that was it. And so 4 minutes later the jury back and said, "You've done it," and yes, he had, but there was no representation. It was very much, as you say, I think even as late as like William Palmer, I think he's supposed to put forward his defence. He's supposed to organise it. It's almost like you prove you are innocent. So I don't know when legal representation. Actually, that's a good question. I don't know. Do any of you watch Murder Mystery in My Family?
No.
You see, I must be so gruesome. It's obviously I'm some kind of murder sick mind. I'm sorry, I'm just big off I go. I can see people. You're supposed to not. I do nice talks. I do things on DNA, not just dead people that are murdered. I do nice things.
So what's this program?
It's called Murder, Mystery and My Family, and it's basically taking crimes that were committed up to a couple of 100 years ago. They did the Christina Collins one, and then they've got they've got two now still acting prosecution and defence lawyers who look at the evidence from a modern point of view and try and work out if they would be found guilty or innocent now. And usually
it's not the one that they have in the morning, is it? They had
yeah, I have actually.
I didn't know that was the title of the program.
Yes, yeah. And it's been really interesting because some of them, it's still, yes, they were, and they've always got a member of the family. They found someone who's descended partly, some way along the link to that family, who want to find out if their family member would now be found innocent. Really interesting. I found that quite interesting. But because I did Christina Collins, and I think they did it, but they said they didn't. I think they did.
What channel is this program on?
It was on BBC.
BBC One, yeah.
Oh, right, okay, I'll have a look for that.
I think there's been about 3 series now.
Yes, so very good. Yeah.
Very good. So some of the things they recreate the scenes. So they obviously they get they get forensic scientists in, so they've got
Yeah.
the photograph, if they've got photographic evidence of the time period, so it's the sort of the later Victorian ones. They look at the photographic evidence and show it to a forensic scientist now and ask them about the blood splatter and obviously some of these police vaults and things have still got some of the stuff. They've still got like some of the murder weapons. And in one case, they had one woman, she was strangled. She got this lovely long necklace, and they still had it. They still actually had it in the police vaults of the relevant police station, and they were bringing all this stuff out, and they were talking it through and recreating it and looking at the time frame and where they could be, and looking at the evidence and why it might be that certain people may have told slight fibs. Their supposed star witnesses were actually lying through their teeth. And it's, if you're into sort of like that real crime drama thing, it was quite good.
It's very sad though when they actually, you can see that the person was innocent, and yet now we would find them innocent because of the evidence we've got, the forensic expertise we've got now. And so it's very sad, and these people were buried inside the prison. They hadn't got a grave that their families could go to.
No, I agree. There's a couple, and it's obvious they're innocent, isn't it? They're obviously
yes.
They couldn't have done it.
You
look at it now, and it's like, how on earth did they find these people guilty? It's just so circumstantial. In some of them, there's even people that later on admitted they'd done it.
Yes,
and they were still found. So,
there
you go.
Any other queries, anybody?
No, it's very good. Very
I was
interesting.
wondering how you're going to sleep tonight.
Very.
In my coffee.
I bet you'll all be going off to watch an episode of Murder, She Wrote or something like that to keep your hand in.
Oh, we'll look at that series on BBC iPlayer.
we need a bit of cozy murder, don't we? A bit of cozy murder rather than the
Right. Murder, She
You
Wrote.
mean like Midsummer Murders?
cozy murder.
Which so far-fetched.
Definitely. But as I say, I don't actually spend my whole time talking about horror and death, and I've got children, I had a job, I do family history, I like dogs, it's I don't just, I don't leave here and go into a
Not actually murder people yourself then?
No, not so far. Not that I've actually admitted to in a drunken place.
Right, okay. It's never been found out.
A penny shot.
I think I'm a bit worried about what I found out about, the predilections of the fellow members of the group. I think I shall look at people rather suspiciously from here on.
I have to say it. As soon as there was something mentioned about vampires or Dracula, and I thought, you know what? This is a group I could. There's still waters.
Yeah, I think you're right, Keith. The social distancing will prevail even
Should
after
be continued.
There won't be much hugging going on, that's for certain.
It's with knives behind backs.
Right, well, can I, on your behalf, thank Karen for a no, delightful's not the word, is it? An excellent talk.
Awesome.
And if any of you are planning a murder, you'll know what you need to do to get away with it.
Don't get drunk. Don't tell a
strategy.
relative.
No.
Don't wear bloody clothes and put them back by your bed. Just don't.
In somebody else's boots, that's the thing.
That's the one.
Anyway, thank you, Karen. Can we give her a round of applause, please?
Been so nice. It's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Right, well, we will see you, the rest of you, in a month's time for the next one, and I will send you details.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah, lovely to have met you.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Bye.
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 Bye. Sleep well.